Welcome to yet another podcast episode. Today's topic is going to be about saving money and pretty much just talking about, well, end up talking about things I do and what I realized. And you're going to see how this realization is pretty much what is supporting how I do things. Okay, the first thing is that earning money is not easy. Typically you're going to have to do something for it, like work. Even if it's working for yourself, that's something you have to deal with and something you have to do. It takes energy and time to earn it. It takes effort and you have to put energy into it, focus. This is something you have to do in order to make whatever it is you make, whether it's a lot or a little. And something I realize is that even earning a little, if you're not earning so much, as long as it's consistent, then you have a better chance of things looking better. You have a better chance of the feeling of wealth and also the wealth, and aka the abundance. And just realizing that you don't need so much money, but as an individual, you personally would want to have enough money to be able to move not only how you normally would like to move, but also with a little extra. That's something I realized. I realized that over the years, no matter how much I make with my job or whatever, I've seen that my spending habit has been pretty consistent. And if anything, I've just modified it to not only make it better, but save. One of the ways is, just watching out what I eat and trying to eat more healthy, which means that I would have to buy less items or maybe go a few days without buying certain items and little stuff like that. And then, when I do buy certain items, it's going to be, groceries, I'm eating vegetables, and, vegetables are affordable, very, very affordable. And doing that's been one way. Another way has been shopping around by browsing and literally just Googling as much as I can. Just looking at all the products they have. Let's say I want a specific product. Let's say in this case a supplement, protein. My only options are to just get the same thing again because it was good, or if I'm going to try something different, I'd want it to be just as good as the other thing, and maybe this one would just have a different flavor, the other one doesn't, but it's going to be the same thing. I don't want anything lesser. I want something that is pretty much right out there with it, and then I'd also paying attention to when a price is lower, because it could be that one product that is just as good or equally good as the other one you normally get. It could be on a discount. And so that's a great opportunity to not only try something different, but save money. And that's another way. And then another way that I try to save money is just acknowledging that, or paying attention to how much something is for all I'm going to get into for it. You know, like I'm taking into account how far it is. I'm taking into account how much money I'm going to spend, the trip back. I'm taking into account the traffic, um, and all these things. And also, taking into account whether or not I've been eating healthy enough to have something or been saving well. I take all this into account, and when I do this, most of the time what I end up doing is I realize that it's not worth it. When I take all those things into account, it's like, yeah, I'm in the mood for it. Yeah, I want to get this, but do I really want it that bad? Because most of the time I'm already all set at home with the stuff I got, like for groceries and other things. And let's say it's even let's say it's just a piece of equipment that I would want. Maybe not need, but I'd want it because it would help me with something, a piece of equipment, some piece of machinery, whatever. Let's say a printer, just to throw an example. I'm not looking for this, but this is an example. Let's say I've been eyeing out for a printer, and this is what I want. I want a specific printer that does all these things. So this printer is something I want, and I would know I really want it if it's been on my mind for a while. And I start to think about the importance of having this printer. What would it mean? And once it's here, I would think about just the lifestyle with the printer. I'd want to use this printer. So I start to think to myself, how badly do I want a printer? Why do I want a printer? And then I look into how much a printer, especially the one I would want, would typically go for. And I look for the lowest and the highest, something that's compatible. And I take that into account, and so I just write it in my mind. Because in my opinion, the sooner I get the printer that I don't necessarily need, then that would mean that whatever money I spend on, I'm going to be, that's less money I'm going to have sooner than later. And so what that means is, with less money sooner than later, that means later, when you want something that's more than the printer, that not only it could be a combination of a need and want, then that means when you spend on that particular moment, you could find yourself, after you spend, with less money yet again more sooner than later, or lesser money more sooner than later. Versus if you waited for the printer, you thought about it for a while, because it's not a priority thing, but it's almost like an illusion of priority. And so here you are, you get this thing more sooner than later. If you would have waited, that would have meant that at a later time, a few things could have happened. You could have gotten it more affordable. An opportunity would have came up with where maybe someone could have offered you one. And just overall, you would just have more money to get that. You'd be more in a better position, more comfortable, because that means you can afford it more times over. And then if the other thing comes by, that you also get. Let's say following days later, you get a different thing that you really wanted for real. Probably wanted more than the printer. That would mean that either way, you would have ended up having more money because you waited. You waited, and so that means that until you got the thing, you were able to be more comfortable till a moment where you can afford it more times over. If that makes sense. I might have explained it a bit choppy, but let me put it a different way. So the time it took for you to finally get the printer because you were waiting, you were doing research, and you were not letting that mentality, that illusion of needing it now, you were not letting that poking let you to get it right away, because it wasn't like a super thing. It was just something that was just, it just seemed like the printer would be really nice to have, and you feel like you could put it to use, and you'd find convenience for specific moments. And so you take a while to get this because you don't need it that bad. And so because you're putting it off, that means for the meantime, you will have more money for other things and be balanced off. And so then later, you'll have more money than what the printer would typically cost. You can afford it many times over. And that would be more the better time to get it. That'd be the better time to say, well, let's get this printer because it's been in your mind for so long. It's been in your back of your mind, and you really feel like this printer could add value and be put to use. So it wouldn't just be something that sits there. You put a lot of thought into it. So that would be the better time to get it. You'll be more comfortable going for a printer. And even so, at that point, when you finally decide to get a printer, it's good to make sure that you still get great value for your money. So that simply means don't get a super expensive printer. Get something that works really well, that is affordable. If you would get the more newer model that came out this year, it'll probably be more expensive, significantly more expensive than a model from last year or a few years ago. That still does the same thing. It's just that maybe the new one has a touchscreen now. You know what I'm saying? And also on that day when you wanted to get it, let's say you get a used one. Let's say you ended up fortunate enough to find a really good printer, or maybe just the one you needed, used. However way that came about. Then you save even more money. You know what I'm saying? Instead of buying it right away. It could be the same thing for anything. Clothes, food, vacationing. That's how I started to think about it. Is if I do it now, just, trying to alleviate the itch, then there's less thought into it. And so that would mean that the only thought would be in just getting it and going. And a lot of energy is put into that time in real time. And so if you do it later, it'll just be much more comfortable. And you could do even a little more. But another point I like to make is that even when you saved enough and you wisely thought of things, and then you try to spend at a better time, it's still a good idea to make sure that for all that time you've been saving wisely and doing all those things wisely and just going out of your way, it makes sense to, when it comes to spending, to still make sure, even as your money is looking better and better and better and going up and up, still make sure that that same habit you have that's made that still continues. Because I feel like in most people's minds, especially millennials, I've been this myself, you would think that the more you have and accumulate, that means that the shopping spree goes all the way up, and that you're buying takeout all the time and just buying stuff all the time, and like if you just want an Xbox and a TV and it just sounds like a good idea, you just want to get it just because you have it and you got that piece of thing. And so what ends up happening when you do that, and that I've seen, is that your money simply goes down more faster than what it took to save it. So there's less energy when it comes to spending. Less energy. And so I started thinking to myself, well, what if you put more energy, just like I'm putting a lot of energy and thought into saving, what if I put a lot of energy and thought before spending? I started simply thinking like that. Because it only makes sense. I mean, if I just put a little energy and just say, you know what, here you go, I'm just pretty much, blind shopping almost. And so I feel like just with anything, putting a lot of thought and energy and time, it shows. It shows. Even with a good diet, even with, studying more, even with, reading more and all those things, it makes a difference. And so that's what I started doing. I started putting more thought into it. I started to put more energy or add more resistance before the money is just simply given out. It's like, wait, it's going to take more energy for me to just buy it. And so that's where I have to put the work in to research, take my time as long as I need, dig through as much info as possible, as many sites as possible, think about the price, and think about how much I have, and think about how much I'll be set back once I spend it at any given time. And what would that mean for me in the upcoming days? Being set back a few $100, what would it mean for me? And so what it tends to mean is, being set back is when you're set back and other things come up you want to spend on, it just doubles how set back you are. And so for me, to as best as possible, not be a setback, I started to think differently. And I'm still working on it. But at least I'm noticing a few cents of a difference that I feel is like, well, it can only go up. Well, I've actually seen a few dollars of a difference. And so now I'm trying to have that go up even more. It's like, okay, I see the dollar differences. But now what do I do with the money? That's what I started thinking about. And then another thing I realized that I think would be nice to mention is just an example, right? Let's say after all expenses. Well, this is more an example reflecting on me. Let's say after all expenses and main things, main important things, and a balanced budget. Let's say after all that, you have only $300 left in your pocket. Or maybe let's say a little less. Let's say $200 left in your pocket. And you started off with $2,000. In my opinion, that's still good. It's still good because I'm explaining why. Because you're probably thinking, well, if I'm gonna have $2,000 and after everything just end up with $200, that's not good. Well, I'm explaining something. It's better off for you to have $200 left after all those expenses, assuming that you put a lot of thought and energy into being manageable, than it is to have any less than that or just $0. I mean, you're better off having even $20 left after all expenses. And then whatever you have left, whatever you average out to normally have left, you have to think about how you could take that number and increase it by a few percent or just double it or more. So let's go as low as $100 left after all expenses. You got to think to yourself, how can you turn $100 left into $115 or $120 left after all expenses? And so you would write a list down on the main things. Okay, that's always going to be locked in. But now the more important thing to look at after that is spending on the fun stuff. And that is just personality spending. The stuff you like to spend on for yourself, whether it's food, services, maybe you like constantly getting a haircut, and you go to the top one, whatever it is, all these things. You put the priorities on your fun. Like, what do you have most fun spending on, or what do you feel as a consumable you like to spend on the most? Because even a haircut, if you go often and you like to get the top thing, that's still a consumable because, you spend it and it's not like it lasts, years. This is something that, your hair grows back. So now you're going to need to get it again once it's all messed up, right? So you got to think about, what do you like to do the most and put it at the top of the list. And just not even what you like to do the most, but just put everything down you typically would spend on. Not in any particular order, but in order would be nice. But just look at all the things you like to spend on. That's what I did. I started looking at all the things I like to spend on. And I realized that I'm very consistent in what I like to spend on. Like, it's like I can go years spending on the same thing, and it's just always looks the same. So I started thinking to myself, so this is part of the example still. Let's say with $100 left, you made this list. You want to turn that into $115, $120. Then you start scratching out what you could do less with. And that's simply it. What can you do less with? And what do you like to do the most that's like a priority and fun, that's like, this is your thing. So you put that, and so you just want to make sure that you have more money for that to do often than to do other things on the side. And let's say you like to eat at a particular restaurant more than any other restaurant, then in my opinion, you should go to the other side restaurants less often. And then come the time that you go to the restaurant you like, you spend what you normally spend, but you still have more money. And so that would mean that even when you go more later on to that other restaurant you like, something that you like to check out sometimes, and you get what you normally get, you'll have more money still. And so the only way you can screw that up is when you stop doing that. When you stop thinking about things in that way. Because it doesn't matter how much you have at this point. It doesn't matter because, it's if you start getting sushi, let's say you make decent money, good enough money, and you start getting sushi and you go to these, Japanese steakhouse places, let's say 4 days a week, because it's good, and you like getting the good stuff, that's an easy, like, $35 to $40, in those 4 days. So that's going to be way over $100 a week. And that's just on food alone. There could be that maybe you want to go shopping. That could be something. And then, what else there could be? There could just be other things that you want. There could just be gas too. You got to take that into account, especially if you're traveling for certain items. You got to think about that. Like, all these things, like, drain you. So it just doesn't matter how much you have. If you just go on and on and on as if there's nothing to manage, then things are going to start looking uncomfortable. Like, you're going to start feeling tight, and you're going to start feeling like you can't do what you want to do because of certain things. And these are going to be things you like to do the most. And you realize that you spend a lot on stuff, and you kind of just miscalculated. And so you can easily just turn that $100 left that you have after all expenses into $115, $120. So now the biggest question is, what do you do with those extra $15 or $20 that you're getting back now, or even more when you're saving? That's a good question to ask, because it defeats the purpose to save money and have more money in your pocket, to then just spend that money out and that be it. You know what I'm saying? Like, for me, for example, it's in your best interest to once you spend, you make sure that you're getting something super valuable that's long lasting. A good tiny example would be if you get a supplement. You start getting into eating healthy, you get supplement. Let's say with this money saving tactic and those extra $20 you're saving yourself now or more that you're getting back, you start buying your supplements. Then that's more worth the money, and even counts as an investment more than if you just went out shopping and bought a t-shirt or a pair of shoes or both, or you bought yourself, a pair of headphones. That would be more valuable, because the protein's something that you will consume, but you're getting something out of it. You're going to get more energy, more muscle. You're going to sustain yourself. Not only that, but that supplement lasts a few days, maybe up to 2 weeks, depending how you use it. So that's definitely going to give you a better stretch for your money. That is like Think of it as spending, but with a lot of substance to it. That's the way to think about it. You spend, but there's a lot of substance. There's a lot behind it. You know, the protein you're going to get, this is an example, by the way. You're going to get, you know, your protein. You're going to get yourself the amounts you need. You're going to build the muscle. It lasts. So it's not like it's going to go away in 2 days or 1 day after consuming it. Or, you know, it's not just going to be something you wear. It's going to be something you put to use. The protein is going to be like a tool that does more. So that's when that saving makes sense for when you spend. You got to think about it like that. And that's just an example on making it useful, you know, to spend. Another example could be is, like I said earlier, when it comes to spending, you browse and try to find something that's more affordable than what you typically find it for. And just try to think more positively and think to yourself, well, if I spend less, I'll save more money. And for something that is more money, getting a pinch more, you got to think about it that it's not going to be worth it. It's not going to be worth paying several hundred or several $1,000s more for a pinch of a difference. And that's normally what I've seen more expensive to me, is a pinch of a difference. You know, a look. It looks like something, but it's just a pinch of a difference. You know, that's what I started thinking. And so another example could be, let's say even if you bought clothes, let's say you are a clothes shopper. How can you turn clothes shopping into a more money-saving, productive spending with substance? Well, you do it less often. Try to get things that are on sale that you wanted before that is on sale now. And, you know, just browse around to see, you know, if you just shop in one area or one section, you're going to miss out on other types of styles in brands and sections. So you look at other brands and sections and see what they have, and they could just probably have something more affordable that looks just as good, but it's just that they look very different than that one. So you like how this one looks now. And so you're walking home with not only looking different, but you upgraded your style and you save money. Well, that's productive. That's a lot of substance to that moment. Now, let's say you go as far to model off these clothes you get, you know, as part of your Instagram thing. You know, you're trying to look classy, you're trying to look, you know, elegant. You know, you take good pictures with this. That could help a little bit. And so there's more substance to it now than just spending and then not being wise and just being short on money because you overspent and you just wanted that item and that's it. You know what I'm saying? So you see what I mean, like the difference that it makes. And so when you do that more and more and more, that's just more change and more change, adding and adding and adding. And as it's adding and adding and adding, you have to repeat that. And so the question, once again, interestingly enough, is, well, what are you going to do with all that money that you saved? Now you have a lot more than before doing this saving stuff and way of life. What do you do now? Like, could you ever get a time to spend something, to buy something expensive? I think that's a question to think about. That's the question that I thought of that hit me. It's like, because we're talking about trying to be wealth. Everybody wants to be rich, wealthy one day, right? And but you still have to save. And people say you have to save and save and save. And with what I said to try to save, you gotta, you may wonder, is there gonna ever be a time where you can buy yourself something expensive? And so I started thinking about that. Expensive, buying something expensive. What is that? Is it a psychological thing? Is it something real to want something expensive? Or do I just want something nice of value that's different? So let's say, an example would be, the car of your dreams, right? Maybe that game system, maybe that TV, maybe that, what else could be that house? Maybe, what else do you possibly want? Maybe that expensive lawnmower you wanted, whatever. Anyways, just that expensive item. Let's say a car. The question becomes, when is it a time to spend on something nice for yourself? Because here you are, working hard, putting in a lot of hours, busting your ass. You're putting in a lot of time and energy, and you're saving. You're being very disciplined. So you feel like, man, can I ever get something nice for yourself? And the answer is yes. But you got to think more outside of the economical instinct that everyone would have on the planet. Yeah, you gotta think more deeply, because like I was saying earlier, you could be buying something expensive, but all it is a pinch that you're getting out of it. Let's say you get an expensive Gucci bag. Let's say that bag costs $3,000, whatever the heck it is. I mean, it's expensive. So if you buy that, in my opinion, you're getting ripped off. In my opinion, you're getting ripped off when you're getting that expensive $3,000 bag. That's just an example of just how terrible that is. So you just don't want to do that. It's expensive. You have the money, and you would think, well, if I can afford this, that means I'm doing well. It's like, well, yeah, maybe in one end, but this is mainly for the overall average, person that is trying to go from scratch up. This is what I feel like you have to do either way, because last thing you want is to have a lot of money and then you spend, and when things are not going good, you still haven't adjusted yourself, and you're going more down and up, and more down than holding yourself. Because if you're going down, the last thing you want to do is to hold a bowling ball to go down even more faster. Last thing you want is to just go down so fast, because when you're going down at that speed, it's like you can't see much. Versus if you do these things and you're more disciplined, you could see now. You could see what down would look like. You could see what making certain errors and going down a certain path could mean. And so since you want to avoid that, you don't do that. And so just to balance yourself off, you delay spending a bit. And you just, but that delay is not delay, it's thinking. And so it just helps you in the long run. So because something I realize is when it comes to wealth, which is something everyone wants, um, it's more about balancing yourself off and trying to be in a better balance of situation and timing and finance with funds. You know, an example would be, let's say in a perfect world, you just got out of high school, and instead of doing your traditional, you know, just going to work and trying to accumulate money and save with what you're getting paid, let's say $17 an hour or whatever. Let's say instead of starting from scratch like that, let's say your parents, let's say, like I said, in a perfect world, let's say somehow you got hooked up with $20,000 coming out of high school. Okay, with $20,000, once you go to that job, you're gonna be chilling. As far as going to work, you're gonna be chilling because you have what you need, and you have the money, and it's not gonna be like that tougher hole where it's like, you know, in your first 2 weeks you bought yourself something nice, and so now you're set back, and you're just going out and chilling with your friends. And so pretty much you're gonna have to be working with no money, as if you're starting over again. You know what I'm saying? And so trying to break that barrier to be in a better balanced situation where you have more money than not throughout the weeks and after you spend, that's much tougher to do. And so that's what tends to create, starting from scratch, that hole. It's like, you know, when you start your first job, you're not going to be good at saving off the bat, you know, and typically you would want to spend, especially if it's your first job or whatever, you typically would want to spend. What millennial wouldn't? What teen, person in their 20s, or just anybody wouldn't want to spend, right? You got to this job and you're earning money, and yeah, you'd want to spend. And it makes sense. But because you're starting from scratch and you have to manage yourself starting from scratch with what you're recently getting paid, that takes a lot of thought and deep thinking and discipline to do that, to save and get yourself balanced off, because the imbalance comes when you're not, let's say from scratch, you're not doing these things correctly and saving. That means you're going to be spending, and then you're going to be short until the next pay week, and that's going to keep repeating and repeating, and that creates the sense of being in a hole and things are getting difficult. But it's just that you're not giving that chance to be balanced off, where you're at one end of the seesaw and you're at the bottom and things are up more to your favor, versus, you know, the weight being all in the other end and you're being all the way up with your head in the clouds. It's like you need to be up. You need to put that control on, that thought, that deep thinking, that more energy to have things be raised more to your favor. And that creates a more better balance than an imbalance, you know, because the balance is more towards your favor because of the things that you're doing. So if you do all these things, you'll be better off. But like I said, there's not much of a perfect world like that, you know, where you're getting a lump sum of money and then you're working. You know, you're going to be much better off as the years, even with hopping around jobs, because, you know, what it would take to save $20 from scratching your own is completely eliminated, that effort and time and energy. So now you can focus on other things. You know, you could just try to manage your money with the money you already have. Just not thinking about, oh man, just going into work, having no money because you spent on this. You know, you're already ahead of time at that moment. But that's not really the case in life. You don't get a lump sum of money. You start with whatever career you do. You start and you get literally paycheck to paycheck. Even if you're doing real estate, even if you're doing movies, it doesn't matter. It's still paycheck to paycheck. You get one paycheck for this gig, right? Is it going to be your only paycheck in your life? You're going to want another one at some point and rely on that paycheck. So everyone lives paycheck to paycheck. It's just that some are bigger than others. But still that same concept applies to what I was explaining. But it's just even more wiser for when you're starting from scratch. Because a lot of people want to do things from scratch. That's something I feel like I've picked up on and seen. People want to figure out what to do from scratch. And to do things from scratch, build from scratch, it takes working from scratch. And so when you're dealing with scratch, you're going to have to do these things I talked about, or at least think about them enough where you figure something else out. You figure something out to be able to successfully slowly clear out the imbalance. And, you know, whatever dimes and nickels, cents, or a few bucks you save, you have to acknowledge what you saved. Acknowledge it. And realize and start getting into the thrill of saving. You know, get into the fact that you're getting more than what the average person would get, because you're putting even more thought into it. And so here you are now with more stuff than other people. Isn't that abundance already, you know, forming? And so that's how I started thinking about things. And it's been working. It's been doing something. You know, it's not nothing crazy, you know, but the fact that it's doing something, you know, you're seeing the cent and dollar differences, then all it's doing for me now is just, now I'm trying to think of what else could I spend on now that would have it be worth the time. And if there's nothing to spend on, I'm not going to force myself to think about what to spend on either. You know, it's like, you know, instead of thinking to myself, well, I haven't spent in a while, let me see what I shop for. I don't really care about that. My main interest is feeding and supplementing what I would rather spend on come the time. And realizing that when it comes to spending, typically you would want to spend at an unexpected time. You know, interest can be very volatile with oneself. You don't know when you're going to suddenly want to buy a camera. You don't know that. But come the time, that camera's going to be, a little over $500? So you got to think about that. Come the time you want to buy this camera, are you going to be ready to buy it if it's of real interest? Can you afford it more times over at that time? Or come the time you want a camera, are you going to have to be saving to amount to what it costs to finally get it? And will you just spend on it once you saved exactly what it is? Or will you wait until you surpass what it costs, browse, and then get it? And maybe probably get it for a little cheaper. Even if you get it for what it is, the fact that you waited to be able to afford it more times over, it's even much better, because come the time you spend, It's not just the camera you don't want to buy in that week. You know, that $800 camera, once you buy that camera, it's not like you wouldn't want to buy anything else throughout the week. You got to keep that in mind. You will want to still buy something outdoors. You know, maybe you get invited to the cookout, whatever is a cookout. You want to buy food and booze. Well, it'd be nice to know that on top of spending that $800, there's money to also just throw down in this unexpected event on the cookout. And then maybe the next day or a few days later, you want Starbucks, you want pizza, whatever it may be. Or maybe you need to repair something that broke. It'd be nice to know that on top of spending those $800 for that camera, since you waited to be able to afford it more times over, there's no flow disruption. There's no, oh man, this camera. You're going to be thinking about, man, how this camera set you back. Instead of thinking about how the camera set you back, you want to think about how the camera didn't set you back. It wasn't the camera's fault. The camera is just a camera. So you don't want to put that negativity on the camera, because that camera can be put to use, and it can be an entirely positive thing. It is a positive thing. So last thing you want is to say, well, that camera set you back, so now you think the camera sucks. And it's crossing your mind, or what if you sell it? It's like, no, you want to keep the camera. The whole point is to get the camera, to keep it, take awesome photos. You know what I'm saying? But thinking about it that way keeps the flow going. The camera, buying the camera, shouldn't cut you off from spending in other scenarios, especially in scenarios that you would want to spend, because the time calls for it. It just seems like, well, it'd be a nice day to get this or that, whatever it may be. And so that's what I've seen the flow to life typically be. That is the comfort level I've seen life to be the best at. Is in those scenarios where, you know, whatever, like I said, that cookout, it's a great day. Someone thought of a cookout. Boom, cookout seems like a great idea. You want to hit up people to do this thing. I mean, that's how I've seen life is. And so it'd just be nice for when that moment comes, you could fully go all out in making this happen successfully. And you turn into an awesome cookout. Great food, booze, few friends over. It took about almost like a $50 investment. And so that's how I feel like life tends to be comfortable at. That's what gives a feeling of wealth and abundance. Is what I've seen, at least with money, is, you know, this just that difference of not having enough money to do that, and then having the adequate money to be able to do that in that time. I mean, it's the reason it comes to be. Not only is it a good day, but there's money to be able to make this happen. And I'm not saying that it's about money. The point I'm making is that in this economy, in this human life with money and how it is, like, and when we're talking about feeling successful, wanting to be there in abundance, I feel like this is like the hallmark of spending and what it means. And it's just those moments where, like, that's what the point of the money. And so with doing those things I was saying, it allows for this flow to happen, because it's not a flow of constant spending on command, because you're not made out of money. But what it means is you'll be so balanced out with your money that even if you're not making a lot, you're making a lot happen through the side. There's a lot of digging and groundwork and effort, time and energy going on, that you create this ability to, at a random given day, throw a cookout, invite people over, and everyone's eating, and you put money in, and it was all you that made it And it could be, that scenario could be applied to other scenarios with traveling. You know, you do all these things right, you'd be able to afford to go to Europe with more money times over. And so that means that when you do this, you'll be comfortably able to do it. It wasn't an intense management. It was just more like you have more than enough and you're doing this. And even though you're doing this, you're still doing it wisely and you're still getting that experience. And so you're creating the satisfaction, an intense satisfaction from doing the alternatives and thinking wisely enough to be able to save your money. And so you're doing more. And so you're going more forward, if that makes sense. So that's something I realized. And literally pedaling your way, nickel and diming it, it's still something. And thinking positive behind the scenes and all this just drives things more forward. And so that's what I wanted to talk about today. Explain just that, all that I said. And hoping that whoever is listening not only understands what I was talking about, but can apply it and just have a way of thinking of things that's differently. Because there's a lot of things to shop for, but not everything is calling to be shopped for. You know, not a bunch of stuff being out there to spend on doesn't mean that you're going to be spending on everything that's out there. You know, you got to keep in mind those things that are up to buy think of it as a temptation. Think of it as another's effort to make sales. And they're doing the best they can. You need to think about whether or not you really need that. It's not just for you to go shopping for the heck of it because you have a few bucks. You really have to think about things. And then, you know, let's say in the middle of doing all this discipline stuff I talk about to save, you take it to the next level in not only trying to save money, but maybe trying to make money, then you would still apply that same thing I said. Where can you go for the most affordable service? What resource can give you more bang for your buck? And then once you find these things, work with what you got. You know, you went to the trouble of finding your best price, your best resource out of 20 places, then that's what you got. And so now you can start selling, but you're still doing those things I talked about and applying it at a bigger scale just in a different element. And so, yeah, just, you know, if you think about these things, I think you will your eyes will open up a little more. And so that's what this podcast is about today. I'm going to end it now. Stay tuned for more topics. Who knows what it will be about next time, but that's why there isn't much coming out all at once, because I really think about what to talk about. And it just turns out that this is something that came out. So I had the words for it. And so who knows what it'll be about next time, but yeah, stay tuned for more, and goodbye.